Hello everybody. I'd like to thank everyone for letting me telepresent. If it's good enough for Edward Snowden, it's good enough for me. My name's Joe. I'm going to talk to you about some of the information that the Domesday Dataset can give us about AAC. I research AAC in the UK, and the same type of questions come up whenever I talk to people outside the field. How many people in the UK are using eye gaze systems? What proportion of AAC users have aids that have internet connectivity? How much money would fund AAC provision in the UK for 12 months? In all of these cases, it's not so much that we don't know the answer, it's more that we, as a community, have considered them to be impossible questions for so long that we don't really think about them. In the UK, 34% of the AAC market is covered by National Health Service trusts, and they keep a responsibility to keep track of their spending. So to answer our questions, I made 300 freedom information requests, one, sometimes two per trust, looking for details of the AAC devices that they supplied over the last 5 years. I spent a few months putting it together, cross-referencing, tracking down old price lists, and so on and so forth. And at the end of that time, we get this. A listing of every AAC device purchased by the UK's National Health Service. Dates and details, makes and models, prices and provenance. And just as a word about the provenance, next to each purchase you'll find a link. That link takes you to a web page that contains all of the original data and the full chain of every email between me and the public body. So you can trace every byte of the data back to the source, every clarification, every download, every file. Occasionally, people email me to tell me that I've forgotten to carry a 1 or similar, or there's a slight typo error. And in such cases, I correct it and we release a new dataset. A guy working for one of the big AAC companies once emailed me to say, hey, we didn't sell 6 of this device in that area in 2008, we sold 7. Which I actually think is a ringing endorsement of the accuracy of the dataset. I can, of course, spend an hour telling you how much this is better than any other estimate we have, but that's outside the scope of the talk. Also, I can do several hours on the privacy implications and the safeguards we put in place, but again, outside the scope of the talk. A lot of my research centres on privacy for AAC users, so it's implicit in the design of this study that privacy isn't breached, because these are people who find it a touch difficult to defend themselves. Now, I know this data has been useful at the political level. The postcode lottery and the differential in the pricing, those elements have led to a number of parliamentary written answers from the responsible ministers in the UK. And we also know it's been useful at the ground level for users, family members, social workers. I occasionally get really quite heartwarming emails from people who've used it to beat funders over the head until a communication device dropped out. And so that feels pretty good. But the original goal was to create something that was useful at the research level, and this talk examines that. So we as researchers know very little about the prevalence of AAC equipment, and that makes it difficult to establish baselines or contexts. Perhaps worse, when researchers and engineers propose solutions, they must also make a wide range of assumptions about the applicability of their work. Imagine an innovative new model for AAC. We could all imagine it then failing because it requires a consistent internet connection from the device, which perhaps only 5% of users have. Or do they? So the majority of AAC research is kind of devoted to building up a library of case studies to show the benefits of AAC for various user groups. Now, this focus in social issues in the AAC research is laudable and it's vital for the overall area. However, researchers working in assistive technology would be more effective if they could answer direct questions about need, capability, and technology. For example, a researcher who must choose between supporting a project that reduces errors in word prediction using eye gaze by, say, 20%, or a project that makes step-by-step devices more responsive and intuitive to use for children. That researcher has a difficult choice about which project to support, without any evidence, certainly. Now, if that researcher could check that in a particular geographic area there were 45 eye gaze systems and over 600 step-by-steps, then that might influence the decision. In either direction, of course, depending on the weighing given to a variety of other factors, but it would give them data. At a higher level, this is, of course, the calculation that we expect funding bodies to be making when awarding the grants that even allow projects to begin. Having quantitative manufacturing data also supports much more general estimations of research impact, as well as helping research groups evaluate potential commercial partners. Even the strong efforts that have been made to give estimations of need and use have been made, but they can't give us the research granularity that we need as technologists in terms of touchscreens, in terms of access, in terms of the number of buttons on the device. But now we've got the Domesday data. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. To illustrate the use of the Domesday data, for technical researchers at least, we're going to give some simple examples in this talk regarding the popularity of various types of AAC device. This table shows the list of most common high-tech AAC purchases by the NHS in Scotland, ordered by the number of units purchased between 2006 and 2012. This table gives the same table for purchases in England. Both tables are based on a relatively open definition of high-tech AAC. These lists include only devices that can produce a range of different utterances and that allow those utterances to be selected by icon or keyboard. As a result, they don't include such devices as, for example, Big Macs, Jelly Bean Twists, Step-by-Steps, Megabees, and many others, although all of those devices are included in the Domesday Dataset. By the way, if you're going to quote these figures, please read the relevant paper first. There are a bunch of caveats. So, some of the more counterintuitive results, which are of course always the most interesting, from these tables include the general absence, with the notable exception of the iPad and iPod, of touchscreen devices. Indeed, both the Lightwriter and the GoTalk range comfortably sell more than twice as many units as their nearest touchscreen rival. A more sobering result to consider for researchers in technical AAC is the popularity of devices that are less obvious targets for customization and improvement. The GoTalk and TechSpeak ranges are solid favourites for a particular section of the market, and part of their appeal is that they are relatively non-technical. For example, neither device has an LCD screen, instead they have bullets for printed icons. And they are much easier for users and staff to get to grips with. Now, this appeal is somewhat in tension with advanced features like automatic generation of content and voice banking. It's entirely possible that technical research will have more impact if it focused on making high capability of devices more acceptable to existing users, as opposed to increasing the already impressive capability of existing devices. Now, I'm aware that every other presentation at this event is on the topic of cool customizations for new AAC devices, so I should say this is probably just me over analysing the data. Let me go on to my second example. Tablet-based AAC. Since the iPad came onto the market, users, professionals and researchers have been simultaneously told that the iPad is simply the flavour of the month at the moment, and it's just the effect of hype. While at the same time we get the major manufacturers simply can't compete with tablet-based AAC at any level other than the eye gaze. It would be nice to find out properly, wouldn't it? You know, given that we're researchers. If we look at our previous table, we can see that the iPad is making a little bit of a dent, getting involved. But this table is information starting in 2006, and the iPad came out in 2010. So maybe we look at just the data we have starting then. And that's a little bit more dramatic. Apart from anything else, it's possible to think of 3 or 4 reasons why the Domesday Dataset might be underestimating the number of tablets in this table. For example, tablet-based users might just be repurposing one that's already in the home. Or, while you might be prepared to wait a year for the NHS to fund you for a £5,000 device, you're much more likely just to go into your overdraft and pick up something for £500 because that's what your child or your family member needs. On the other hand, tablet-based AAC might be having trouble doing its actual job. I was chatting to a social worker recently, and she was telling me that she'd moved heaven and earth to get funding for a little girl to use an iPad for communication. The problem was, every time the social worker visited, the little girl's mum was playing with it. So, we do still definitely need the qualitative work. A quick note on this table. While there are 2 or 3 Windows tablets in the dataset, there are literally no Android ones. I suspect this for several reasons. My data stops in 2012, which is just when you'd expect it to be a bit of a push, but also I can imagine the NHS having got the hang of Apple. So I've given you 2 examples. The data is open, it's accessible, and it's easy to use. Have a play, see what comes out of it. What I had intended to do, had I more time, was to take the set of papers from last year's conference, pull out a set of innovations, and then for each innovation look at the proportion of the population that it might affect, both on existing devices and on the ones that we extrapolate for the future. But that ends up being a very long paper indeed. All I'm suggesting is this. When your head of department or your funders ask, so, can anyone use your research? The Domesday Dataset might be able to support your answer. Thank you very much for your time.